I'm Dr. Chris Martin. When you think of outdoor landscapes, what plant form usually comes to mind first? More than likely, it's trees. People have planted trees since antiquity. For most people, trees elicit a calming, positive, and timeless reaction. In cultures across time, trees are the environmental beacons used by people to define their relationship and place with nature. This is commonly known as a sense of place. Landscape trees are vital to the health and beauty of cities. They provide many benefits to people and the surrounding environment. Landscape trees provide shade and reduce local ambient temperatures, produce oxygen, mitigate city pollution, provide food and habitat for many animals, and grace us with their sculpture and beauty. In this short video, we'll take a look at 5 popular tree species that thrive here in the desert Southwest. Mesquite trees are in the taxonomic genus Prosopis and have become an iconic element for water conservation in the desert Southwest. Many different species and hybrids of mesquite dot our landscapes in Phoenix. Most of them are offspring from naturally occurring tree populations that are distributed from the deserts of South America to Mexico, Texas, and all over the Sonoran Desert, including Arizona. All mature mesquite trees share similar forms and growth habits. The form of mesquite is generally more wide-spreading than tall. Their open canopies are composed of feathery, fern-like leaves that are uniquely configured to conserve water and not overheat in the hot desert sun. As mesquite trees get older, the grayish to reddish-brown bark on their trunks becomes tough, rough, and ragged. Mesquite tree wood is famous for general charcoal cooking, smoking fine meats on a barbecue, or burning for heat. During March and April, mesquite trees grow creamy green catkin flowers. These are later followed by 3 to 5 inch long light brown pods that always seem to fall off the tree all at once in the middle of July. These dried seed pods of mesquite can produce a lot of ground litter. However, these pods are also edible and can provide a valuable and nutritious food source for wildlife and people alike. Mesquite is a tremendously versatile landscape tree. Their lush, dense canopies provide welcome summer shade in desert landscapes, parks, resorts, civic spaces, and naturalized areas. A note of caution, though, the growth habit and ultimate size of mesquite trees is often unanticipated by homeowners and professional landscapers alike. Mesquite trees can grow very quickly, especially when irrigated. If heavily watered, these vivacious desert trees can ultimately grow to up to 40 feet tall with a lateral spread of up to 80 feet. Failing to account for their robust size is one of the most common horticultural errors seen across Phoenix landscapes today. When these fast growers become larger than anticipated, they are almost always subject to unbridled hacking. Mesquite trees respond to this mismanagement practice by growing ever faster. This can set up a vicious cycle of the battle, mesquite versus man. Well-meaning homeowners and landscape professionals alike sometimes aggressively prune unruly branches, which can ultimately create a host of secondary problems, such as the near ubiquitous bacterial disease on mesquite in Phoenix known as wetwood. When all's said and done, though, mesquite trees are an important part of our desert landscapes. They are a wonderful shade tree, provide habit and food for native wildlife, and are very well adapted to our local climate and growing conditions. So remember, whenever planting a mesquite tree in a Phoenix landscape, always evaluate whether the planned space can accommodate the mature size of this fast-growing tree. Parkinsonia, Florida, or commonly called the blue Palo Verde tree, is the official state tree of Arizona. Palo Verde is a Spanish phrase that means green stick. This is an apt common name for this Sonoran Desert native because of its unusually smooth, bluish-green bark that covers the entire trunk and branches. As with most native desert trees, blue Palo Verde has a naturally rounded form that is somewhat open and wide. Depending on water availability, blue Palo Verde trees in city landscapes can eventually grow to 30 feet tall and as wide as 50 feet. Out in the desert, native blue Palo Verde trees grow full, rounded canopies with branches that extend all the way to the ground, giving it an almost shrub-like appearance. One common practice in Phoenix is to raise the crown of Palo Verde trees as they grow by removing the lower branches to, in effect, give it a more tree-like form. Now, this practice leaves many pruning wounds on these trees that often result in the spread of a bacterial disease called wetwood. Please prune Palo Verde trees sparingly and with care, especially as they become mature. The blue Palo Verde tree is normally only sparsely foliated with small bluish-green leaves that seem to grow more profusely when it rains. Like the leaves, the bluish-green stems and branches of this great tree have chlorophyll and are fully able to process carbon dioxide into sugars through photosynthesis. In late March and April, the blue Palo Verde tree produces an intense burst of lemon-yellow flowers that cover the entire canopy of the tree. Blue Palo Verde trees are the Sonoran Desert's way of announcing the arrival of spring. During the early summer months, blue Palo Verde trees are covered with a different cloak of brown pods, which usually fall to the ground in the middle of July. Native wildlife depend on Palo Verde pods as part of their summer diet. Now, because they are native desert trees, it should come as no surprise to anyone that blue Palo Verde trees are completely at home growing in the most extreme weather and soil conditions of our desert. Once established in a Phoenix landscape, these environmentally tough trees thrive without being irrigated. So where is the best place to incorporate the blue Palo Verde tree in a Phoenix landscape? I suggest that it's best to showcase this tree in large-scale desert plantings with other native Sonoran Desert or desert-adapted landscape plants. Oh, this tree does not work as a lawn, street, or parking lot tree. It really needs space to grow. The blue Palo Verde is an environmental icon of Sonoran desert preservation and water conservation efforts today. If allowed to grow naturally without invasive pruning, their open canopies provide a wide-spreading, filtered shade that also serves as habitat for native and exotic wildlife alike. The blue Palo Verde tree is a foundational part of our beautiful and rugged state of Arizona. Our next landscape tree is the olive, with the botanical name of Olea europaea. The olive is a relatively small, many-branched evergreen tree that grows best in a Mediterranean or hot desert climate. Archaeological evidence suggests that olive trees were domesticated by people as early as 10,000 years ago. Olives have been closely associated with human religious, cultural, medical, and food traditions for thousands of years. In the Mediterranean region, where it is native, some olive tree specimens are many centuries old. Olive trees flourish in our desert climate. They are exceptionally drought tolerant and heat tolerant. The natural form of an olive tree is irregular and spreading like a very large shrub. Don't expect perfect symmetry to naturally occur with an olive tree. Olive trees are naturally asymmetrical and free-spirited. If well irrigated, olive trees can grow as tall as 30 to 50 feet with a similar width. Olive trees naturally have multiple trunks, but can be trained with persistent effort to have a single trunk. As olive trees mature, they assume a rugged character that brings a sense of timelessness to a landscape setting. Very old olive trees become real works of landscape art when they develop a picturesque, gnarled trunk flare at their base. The stiff and narrow evergreen leaves of olive trees are grayish-green on the top surface and silver on the underside. Light reflects off the leaves, especially when they flutter in the wind, giving the tree a subtle dimension and depth to its canopy. Before planting an olive tree, keep in mind these caveats. First, olive pollen is one of the most important causes of spring respiratory allergies in Phoenix. It's because of this reason most cities in Arizona have banned the landscape planting of fruiting olive trees, mandating instead that only sexually sterile trees can be planted. Second, in older neighborhoods of Phoenix where fruiting olive trees can be found, the dropping fruit is exceptionally messy and can stain hard surfaces. Last, olive trees are highly prone to basal suckering and branching. If these basal suckers are not continuously removed, they will take on a life of their own and lead to landscape oddities like this tree growing in a living pot. As a landscape ornamental tree, olives need little care if a natural landscape appearance is preferred. However, if you're one of those neat freaks that enjoy only formal landscape settings, then watch out for the strong-willed olive. In formal landscapes across Phoenix, olive trees are brutally subjected to all types of pruning calamities and disorders. For example, here they are sculpted into giant beach balls. From antiquity to the present, olive trees remain an economically and aesthetically important landscape tree. They are the iconic persona of a Mediterranean villa and should be a part of anyone's Mediterranean garden motif. Olive is a prominent tree in older Phoenix neighborhoods, and they continue to be incorporated into new urban landscape designs today. Sculptural, evergreen, and tough, olive trees continue in Phoenix as legacy trees. Our next tree is botanically known as Dalbergia sisso. Its common name is Indian rosewood. Indian rosewood trees are native to the Indian subcontinent in South Asia. There, they are an economically important tree. Their wood is harvested for furniture, cabinetry, and musical instruments, and the foliage is used to feed livestock. In Phoenix, Indian rosewood trees have a mostly evergreen habit with a dense canopy of bright green leaves. With ample irrigation, Indian rosewood trees can grow large, up to 60 feet tall. The overall form of Indian rosewood trees is really interesting. Often the main trunk grows in a crooked manner, topped by an asymmetrical, spreading canopy. The lush Indian rosewood tree has bright green, aspen-like foliage that flutter gracefully in the wind. The stout trunks of mature Indian rosewood trees have light-colored bark that is rough and fissured. This feature can add an interesting earthy textural element to the understory of most any landscape. In the early spring, Indian rosewoods produce copious, fragrant, but very small white flowers. These flowers are superseded by light brown, flat seed pods that eventually drop to the ground during the late summer and fall. Indian rosewood trees grow well in Phoenix, provided they're well watered, especially during the hot summer months. They really flourish during our monsoon season. Their growth quickens in the heat of July when our monsoons bring higher humidities and thunderstorms. Now, because they're native to semi-tropical India, Indian rosewood trees will suffer freeze damage below 28 degrees Fahrenheit. These cold temperatures can significantly damage very young trees in the landscape, even to the point of death. But older trees are quite resilient to the cold. They usually only sustain damage to the leaves and will quickly recover once the weather warms in the early spring. Since the early 1990s, there's been a tremendous surge in the popularity of Indian rosewoods as a landscape tree in the greater Phoenix area. They fill a distinct niche as a large, fast-growing shade tree for people who want green landscapes. Indian rosewood is not a desert landscape tree. This hot weather, monsoon-friendly tree can be integrated into many landscape settings, creating the feeling of an oasis in the desert. The botanical name of our next landscape tree is Ulmus parvifolia. This botanical name literally means the elm tree with small leaves. Because Ulmus parvifolia is native to China, it's not surprising that its common name is Chinese elm. This is a large deciduous tree that captures the vision of the ideal city tree because of its umbrella canopy that casts a moderately dense shade atop of a perfect single trunk. Even though it requires moderate amounts of water, especially during the summer, Chinese elm is well adapted to our hot desert climate. Chinese elm trees are moderate to fast growers and can reach heights of 40 feet with a somewhat greater spread. Just keep in mind, if you ever plant a Chinese elm tree in your yard, make sure that you plant it in a spot that has plenty of room for it to grow. In late autumn after Thanksgiving, Chinese elm leaves turn yellowish red, providing Phoenicians like you and me with a brief display of fall color. In the spring, the new growth of leaves is a brilliant bright green. These leaves then turn dark green during the summer months. One very appealing feature of the Chinese elm tree is its flaking, puzzle piece-like bark. Picking at the flaking bark of Chinese elm is therapeutic medicine for those of us impetuous folks that need to keep our hands busy. On a mature elm, this layered flaking bark exhibits a mottled pattern of green, gray, brown, and orange all along the trunk and branches. Upkeep on Chinese elm is minimal if the tree has been properly trained to grow upright from the time it was young and newly planted. Pruning care is usually nothing more than removing broken or crossing branches in late winter when the tree is still deciduous. So, if you're looking for a park-like shade tree with a perfect umbrella form, then choose the graceful Chinese elm. Whether in a residential backyard, lawn, a city park, or civic space, the Chinese elm tree is an ideal shade tree for almost any part of our city. In the desert Southwest, the combination of a favorable climate and landscape irrigation enables the planting of a rich and highly diverse number of landscape trees. In this video, we have featured 5 of the more common and popular landscape trees in Phoenix: the mesquite, Palo Verde, olive, Indian rosewood, and Chinese elm. Now, the popularity of these 5 tree species may be best understood by knowing how they each are used in landscaping to beautify our city environment, enhance human comfort, and help us understand our geocultural legacy and sense of place as a city that is an oasis in the desert.